What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Monday, which means it's time for my top 10 lessons learned video for this week. We're going to look at what just happened in week 10 and talk through how we can take those observations, takeaways, and apply them moving forward as we head into week 11 of the fantasy football season. We have a lot to get into. This felt like maybe the best football weekend we've had all season, where you had so many storylines with Kyler returning. You had Deshaun upsetting the Ravens. CJ Stroud was playing out of his damn mind. We had it all yesterday. This video took a little bit longer to churn out for you guys, but we have a lot here. We have a lot of pictures, a lot of graphics. We have it all. Sit tight. As always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. Now, our first takeaway here is I just want to take a second to appreciate Kyler Murray's greatness. We see so much on Instagram, Twitter, social media. I mean, the guy plays video games. People go crazy about it. I mean, everyone streams. Like, I think Sauce Gardner streams. I love Sauce to death, but I think he streams like a GTA roleplay. So, like, if the Skip Baylesses of the world figured out what Sauce Gardner does on his own time in terms of like role playing and being I don't know. I've never turned into the streams myself, but I know the role playing stuff on GTA. Like, these guys are running around as like cops and robbers, pretty much in a video game, streaming all the time. Everyone does it. Everyone's a streamer these days. The Kyler Murray video game stuff is insane. I know there was literature in his contract. That GM got fired. GMs get fired for a reason. The new guy that they brought in for the Cardinals seems to be doing well, right? He gets the Houston Texans pick. They're set up to kind of tank this year. The Cardinals they're of course not having the same turnaround as the Texans, but the Cardinals seem a little bit better than they were a year or two ago. But regardless, Kyler Murray gets a short end of the stick with the, he's so small and the Call of Duty stuff. And it's just like, can we just sit down for a second? And like, Kyler Murray, I wrote this tweet, and this is his resume so far from high school to where he is now. He went to high school in Texas. Super serious about football. Their championship is played in, I believe, like it's not Jerry's World anymore, but the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and they like sell it out. Like, they go crazy for high school football down there. It's like the most competitive high school circuit there is. He went 42-0. He went undefeated in his Texas high school football career with a 42-0 record. He was the first player to win Mr. Texas Football twice, was the first player to be selected to the Under Armour All-American game in both baseball and football. He gets drafted 9th overall in the MLB. He then wins a Heisman in football at Oklahoma. He gets drafted 1st overall in the NFL, instantly Offensive Rookie of the Year, 2-time Pro Bowler, over 100 touchdowns. And people are like, oh, well, he hasn't had any postseason success. He had Cliff Kingsbury in a supporting cast outside of like DeAndre Hopkins of like not a ton. Like, it wasn't an amazing team. Like, holding up to the standard where he's only played 3.5 seasons to this point. He's looked great. He's looked fine. He's dragged Cliff Kingsbury and them to relevance. They have a new regime now. I just think he gets held up to a really unfair standard for as great as he is. Like, I don't want to get crazy here, but in terms of like multi-sport athletes, like, it's not, of course, like Bo Jackson type stuff, but it's pretty crazy. Like, he was very legit at baseball. People don't understand that. There was a case to be made that Kyler shouldn't even go pro in football. Like, people thought, even after his Oklahoma Heisman season, people thought, okay, maybe he's just going to go play baseball now. Like, that was a real concern as to why somebody shouldn't draft him 1st overall, because is he even committed to football? And as much as people love to make the claim that he's not committed to football, he doesn't care about football, this is a guy who the baseball contracts are crazy. Like, I don't know baseball well, but I know they're getting NBA style deals where like bums out there are getting crazy contracts. He could have just played baseball and done his thing over there, but instead committed to football, comes to play football, returns from an ACL injury, and looks amazing. Now, when we talk about this return from ACL, now, of course, he doesn't look MVP caliber or anything, but the athleticism is there, which is very exciting. He runs on this like 13-yard scramble, game-winning drive. Everything's on the line. You can't even see on this graphic where Kyler even ended up on kind of his route, but he's like scrambling. These guys are running after him. He's just like running around doing his thing. Runs a total of 68.9 yards, reaching 20.17 miles per hour, his fastest speed since week 16 of 2021. So he's fast, he's athletic, he's making plays like we've seen in the past with Kyler. He gets down there, first down, puts him in field goal range, just like absolutely amazing stuff. And that's super, super exciting for Kyler Murray. He turned in, I think that it was a usable fantasy day. It wasn't anything crazy, of course, with Kyler Murray, but he wins the game. He shows the athleticism. I think that, like, you know what I mean? He hasn't played football in like a year at this point. First game back from ACL. I think we only go up from here, which is very exciting. Now, when we talk about the fantasy pieces in this game, you had Marquise Brown, a little bit shaky for Marquise Brown, just 3 targets here, but I don't think that sticks. Like Marquise Brown and Kyler have shown like great chemistry in the past. I think that Marquise Brown's going to bounce back just fine. You have Trey McBride, who just went absolutely nuclear. He had 9 targets. I think he had like over 100 receiving yards as well. He goes absolutely crazy. Yeah, he goes 9 targets, 8 catches, 131 yards. I think James Conner was all right too, where he was fed. Yeah, he had 16 carries, 73 rushing yards. Most days he's going to get a touchdown there, a couple of receptions mixed in. I think that this was just kind of the tip of the spear for what this Cardinals offense can be moving forward, where, you know, it looked like a fantasy wasteland when we were all drafting in the summer. It's like, man, Kyler might not even come back. Josh Dobbs, Clayton Tune, we don't know who's going to start at quarterback. Like, we're getting some clarity here. They have good quarterback play. Again, I think that it's only better days ahead from here. Now, Rondale Moore's 8 targets, I really don't have an explanation for that. Maybe he's somebody to note moving forward, but I got to be honest, as someone that's loved Rondale Moore all the way through, I've seen this song and dance before where he gets peppered with targets and then they go away the next week. So we'll truly see if any of that sticks. Now, after that, we have second takeaway, which is it's time for Arthur Smith to learn Chinese. Now, I say that jokingly, but I mean, man, he loses an awful game versus Josh Dobbs and the Vikings. He didn't even know how to take snaps from his player. He goes to Arizona. It feels like he's on the hot seat. The Falcons Reddit is going crazy. And then he loses, don't get me wrong, I'm getting a phone call here. Don't get me wrong, he loses a close game to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's a great quarterback and all of that, but this was a game that he needed to win. This was a must-win game for Arthur Smith. Honestly, his job was sort of on the line here. We don't know if he's going to get fired or whatever, but he was definitely on the hot seat. This was not a good look, losing on the road to Kyler. First game back from the ACL versus a rookie head coach. Now, I'll be honest, like, this wasn't even totally Arthur Smith's fault. Like, I thought that he actually used these players great. Like, when we look here, the usage, this is what we've been asking for all year. You have the only guys over 20 routes run, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan. The only guys over 4 targets or at 4 targets or more, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. The only running back with 20 or more carries, Bijan Robinson. Like, that is what we've been asking for. But the issue is that it was just too little, too late. He didn't get great play out of Taylor Heineke in this game, which was a big issue for him. Arthur Smith. You also had Bijan had 4 of the 5 inside the 10 snaps among running backs. He had a goal line carry for a touchdown in this game. Like, fantasy-wise, this is everything we asked for. I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but I don't feel a ton of sympathy. Like, this is, to me, too little, too late. Like, he's now using his players in the roles in the ways that they should have been used the entire season. He's now doing that just now as his job's on the line. The season is falling apart. And a part of me feels bad, right? It's like a last-ditch effort to, like, okay, let's stop overthinking ourselves and trying to prove a point. Let's just use the players we drafted, the good ones, you know? But yeah, if he loses his job, I know I said learn Chinese. Like, I am just joking around, but it's one of those rare situations where if Arthur Smith does lose his job, I don't lose any sleep taking a victory lap. We've been frustrated all season long. His dad is a billionaire who owns FedEx. Like, him losing his job is not a big deal. He can do literally whatever he wants with his life after this. He could literally just be a pro golfer. Not a pro golfer, but live his life as a pro golfer if he wanted to. Like, that's the kind of money that family has. On top of that, he was really mean to reporters, man. If he was just more of like a weird coach, but he would light these reporters up, man. These reporters would just ask simple questions. He would give them 5-minute answers, like almost treating them like they're idiots, and like he was just so mean to these reporters that like he talked to them like they were truly, of course, like reporters, I guess on paper are beneath the head coach, but just like a clear lack of respect for the reporters, people trying to just do their jobs, giving them a hard time, playing hardball in every single press conference, everything, just saying, well, you know, if you just looked at the tape, like you would know, and just like being so condescending all the time. It's like, no, buddy, like all of these questions have been warranted. He probably realizes at this point that he screwed up. That's why he's actually using these players in the manner that he should have been using them the entire time. It's just all bad. And again, I don't feel any ounce of sympathy for Arthur Smith. Like, this is all his own doing. He's also such an idiot. Like, he shaved his mustache, and I saw him go on the McAfee show last week, and he said, like, essentially that he immediately regretted it. It's like, dude, like, you're a mess, man. He's what, like 40 years old. He shaved his mustache. It was like, oh no, like that's not what I want. It's like, man, it's a tough scene. I mean, respect to him for finding his way in the NFL, but yeah, man, again, I have no remorse. If he does keep his job, I do hope that this usage sticks, because this is a good thing for everybody in fantasy. Even though Pitts and London didn't do great, it was just kind of a game script where they leaned on the run, and that was great for Bijan. So we'll take that W. Now, our third takeaway or lesson learned here is that Deshaun Watson showed some life and like a gutsy win versus the Ravens here, where Deshaun looked awful early in the year. He had this like shoulder injury. People were saying, like, does he even have the shoulder injury? Is the shoulder injury real? Does he want to play football anymore? Does he just want to take the guaranteed money? I was showing clips on here of him throwing the ball, and there was just no zip on it at all. I honestly thought that he was like, I thought we were cooked in terms of Deshaun Watson for 2023. But he had one of his best games of the year here. Now, the caveat always with Deshaun Watson off the field, there's a conversation to be had there, just in terms of from a fantasy perspective, real life football perspective. He looked good here. Now, what is this chart here? I charted his per game EPA per play. So EPA per play is just per play efficiency by a quarterback. Just like, expected points added per play. So in terms of, okay, your drive is here, how many points should you be putting up? How much are you doing in terms of first downs and big plays are you doing to elevate your offense above what they're expected to score here on a per play basis? And I have at the end here, you have league average, right? So that's the black line. That's just what league average quarterback efficiency has been. And then 2017 to 2020 in the red is what he did on the Texans. So that's his 2017 to 2020 EPA per play. And then I just have per game. So from week 13, 2022, that was his first game back from suspension and on here. All the way through week 10 this year, right? So 10, 2023, that's week 10. And then I have the second half. In the second half of this game, he was absolutely out of his mind, dude. He, against a Ravens defense that's been amazing all year, he goes 14 of 14 passing, 134 passing yards, 16 rushing yards, a touchdown, and he completed a comeback versus a Ravens team that has looked like arguably a top 3 team in football, right? This is a team that murdered Detroit, murdered the Seahawks, 2 teams in the NFC that are like kind of some of the big players over there. Really impressive from Deshaun. Now, you can even see that second half game, week 10, 2023, second half, all the way to .703. Like, he was just an absolute madman in the second half. Now, the issue is that before that was not good. He was 6 for 20 in the first half, 79 yards, 4 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. This was a tweet from like before the second half. And I thought Jacob put it really well, Jacob Sanderson. I think Rorschach test is kind of like the good way to put it. You can see it 2 ways, right? He had a pick 6 on his first attempt, 6.3 yards per attempt, took some really bad sacks, got injured a few times in this game. But then you also have some clutch scrambles, some high-level tight window throws. Arm strength looked good. He had a couple of like deep shots that actually like there was a lot of air under the ball. Tough matchup versus the Ravens defense. They win this game. So you can take it either way. But what I wanted to show with this sort of chart here is things are getting a little bit better. Like you can see week 13 on in 2022, he had just like one game actually over league average, right? Week 17 of 2022. Everything else was bad. But when we go to week 1 of 2023, week 1 was bad, week 2 was bad. Week 3 was really good. That was a bright spot. Then week 9, he was above league average. Week 10 wasn't amazing, but week 10 in the second half, he was absolutely insane. So we're at least seeing some positives, right? From like week 3 on, we're starting to see him come back to form a little bit. Now, do I think that Deshaun's ever going to be the Deshaun that we saw with the Texans, where he's like a 20-plus point per game guy? He's amazing. I don't know. Maybe that comes back to him, right? Like, we're talking quarterbacks. We've seen quarterbacks have success through their late 30s. Like, maybe that comes back to Deshaun. We'll truly see there, but I think that he's at least elevated his play to like top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And if you ask me that question, like, I would say before this week, like, yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me that question before week 9 when he was just like out for weird reasons, I'd probably say like, I don't know. Like, it's weird. His contract is also set up in a way where all that guaranteed money, he's not going anywhere. So he's going to have a lot of games to get back up to the form that he was at in years past. But I think that this year overall has been positive for Deshaun. The shoulder injury has been weird, but really good game from the kind of build on here. And for fantasy, that's exciting, right? A lot of us have him in Dynasty. A lot of us have him in fantasy leagues. To me, he's like a fringe top 12 quarterback in fantasy moving forward. Like, he's a fringe QB1. Like, I would put him, it's close, but like, I was going to say, like, in my head, like, who would you prefer between Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson rest of season at quarterback in fantasy? I think it's very close, if that makes sense. So I think that that's at least something going for him, where I think that Deshaun probably belongs somewhere in like the QB 10 to 15 range rest of season, which is good, right? There was a minute there where it was like, man, it might be like they might just shut him down. He's awful. But then we also had Amari Cooper in this game. I think is worth mentioning. JJ Zacharyson points it out here. In games where Deshaun Watson plays the majority of Cleveland snaps, 17.6 PPR points per game. In games without Deshaun Watson, 9.1 PPR points per game. We also had Elijah Moore here. Looked pretty good. I think Elijah Moore had a touchdown at least, which is good for him. Yeah, he had 7 targets, 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown for Elijah Moore. So that wasn't terrible. His first touchdown of the season, Elijah Moore. This passing offense is just better with Deshaun Watson in there. Now, we're talking a lot about quarterbacks here, but I figure we might as well at the top of this. I also want to talk about Sam Howell, man. Sam Howell. I like to start a Sam Howell dialogue here. Coming out of school, I liked him. But he was 5th round in the draft. Draft capital matters a ton for quarterbacks, right? Like, if you look around at all the top guys, even just in like fantasy football circles of like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Hurts, Herbert, Burrow, Stroud, Lamar, very rarely are these guys getting drafted on day 3. Like, of course you have Tom Brady, but outside of Tom Brady, you're looking at a pretty brutal win rate. Like, I guess you can point to like Kirk Cousins and Brock Purdy, but that's like a significantly lower ceiling than those top guys. Regardless, though, we need to have a discussion about Sam Howell. Now, coming out of school, he was somebody that shouldn't have gone 5th round. That was the weird part about him, is like, after his second year at UNC, he was so good. People were like, man, he might be a top 5 pick. And then in his 3rd year, he didn't like regress really. He rushed the ball more. He lost, I believe, his top targets in like Diami Brown. Daz Newsome was there. I think he had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. So the whole offense takes a step back, but he still looked pretty good here. He played well in his final year, and then he drops all the way to the 5th round, which was wild. But he's one of these rare situations where it's like kind of like Stephon Diggs. Like, Stephon Diggs was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, like a top 5 wide receiver in his class who just held back at Maryland. One of these guys that just shouldn't have fallen that far in the draft. Like, if you asked anybody before the draft where Sam Howell would go, most people would say day 2, like top 50 pick. Maybe he sneaks into the 1st round, and then he plummets. But regardless, he's looked... I'm not ready to call him like a franchise quarterback, but if I was a Washington fan right now, like, I'd be pretty happy with Sam Howell as my quarterback of the future. Like, from one franchise to another, as franchises that haven't had good quarterback play for like long periods of time, I'd be stoked with Sam Howell. Like, Sam Howell looks good, man. He has, right now, he's 6th in the NFL in big time throw percentage, 5.8%, with 24 big time throws. He leads the NFL in big time throws, 24 to 16 big time throw to turnover worthy play ratio. Isn't awful, right? Like, Purdy is 16 to 14, Hurts is 20 to 12. Like, that's not all that far off. You have Trevor Lawrence 17 to 12. Like, Sam Howell has a better ratio than that. Allen's at 18 to 8, which is much better, but Lamar's at like 14 to 11. Herbert's at 16 to 13. So, I mean, he's in this range of like all of these other franchise quarterbacks in terms of big time throws to turnover worthy plays. That's huge. Like, we can just go down the board of like where he's at this point. This is through 11 career starts among quarterbacks. Since 2000, he's 8th in passing yards. Now, passing yards aren't the end-all, be-all, but, I mean, this list checks out. Outside of Nick Mullins, like, these are all great quarterbacks. Mahomes, Herbert, Deshaun, Luck, Cam Newton, Tony Romo, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, in terms of just passing yards through your first 11 starts. I mean, that's great, man. He's also, 66.1% completion percentage. Holds up with the other guys on this list. What else? 7.1 yards per attempt. Holds up. That's, like, right next to where Herbert was, right next to where Joe Burrow was. I mean, like, that's not bad. 18 touchdowns to 10 picks isn't bad either. Like, first 11 starts, like, that's great. Again, I don't think we're completely out of the woods on like Sam Howell being an amazing franchise-level quarterback, but like, there's a lot to like here. Now, if we also look at, this was sorted by completion percentage of that same list. He is 12th. So among quarterbacks through their first 11 starts, he's 8th in passing yards. He's 12th in completion percentage at 66.1%. Like, that's all great stuff. So I think that there's reason to be excited for Sam Howell. I think that he is someone that's going to stay in this league. He causes enough chaos to kind of score points in fantasy. He almost goes on the road and beats a Seattle team in a really tough place to play without Montez Sweat or Chase Young on that defense. they call him Sammy Sosa in that locker room. Like, there's a lot to like, man. I just want to say, I just wanted to sort of bring up, like, let's talk about Sam Howell as, like, a legit quarterback in this league. I just finished up my dynasty rankings over the weekend. I put him, in terms of quarterback, I put him, like, I think right around QB 16, right next to Brock Purdy. Like, to me, however you feel about Brock Purdy, it's like a day 3 standout. I think Sam Howell should be right there, where Purdy, to me, kind of succeeds because of scheme and the players around him. Sam Howell's a little bit more chaotic, but have Purdy and Howell switch spots, and I'm not sure that Purdy has the same success in Washington. Now, I don't know that Sam Howell can play within structure as well as Purdy either, but I think that they're both comparable in terms of just kind of like, man, these guys were day 3 picks, but they're also playing very well, so it's tough to kind of, like, we've seen quarterbacks have short leashes in this league unless you're a first-round pick, and even then, we've seen Trey Lance cut to the curb. We've seen Gardner Minshew had a great rookie year with the Jaguars. He just gets sort of punted for Trevor Lawrence. Like, if Washington wasn't, I believe, they're 4-6 right now. If Washington was, let's say, like 2-9 or 2-8, even through all this, he could be somebody that gets replaced. So it is a little bit weird with these day 3 guys until they get that second contract. Now, something else to note with Sam Howell is we're getting, the Jahan Dotson stuff is so tough, dude. I was in on Jahan Dotson this year. Essentially, I didn't love him a lot as a prospect. I didn't like him as a prospect. I didn't think that he was really all that special coming out of school. Then in year 1, he scores touchdowns early on. Then on the back half of the year, he looks really, really good. He showed enough for me to like him as a year 2 breakout candidate. And it's been brutal, man. If you split the games between Jahan Dotson with Curtis Samuel, when he runs 50% or more of the routes, you have 5.8 points per game as wide receiver 80 for Jahan Dotson. Expected points per game is just based on volume. How many points did you put up? 8.9, not much better. Wide receiver 63 volume. 0.58 yards per run, that is awful. 12.1% targets per run, that is awful. Then he has 2 games with Curtis Samuel. We have 20.9 points per game. He was the wide receiver 4 from weeks 8 to 9. 16.5 expected points per game, so wide receiver 13 usage. That's great volume. 1.97 yards per run. Almost at 2, which is a great number. 18.9% targets per run, way higher. I don't know what it is, because I don't think Curtis Samuel isn't an all-pro wide receiver, right? It's not like Mike Williams in games with or without Keenan Allen. We're talking about Curtis Samuel here. Now, Curtis Samuel's great at what he does as this like gadgety hybrid wide receiver role, but man, as soon as Jahan Dotson isn't just like the second option far and away in this offense, it's tough. Like the Washington football team right now leads the NFL. Sam Howell leads the NFL in passing yards. Now, they haven't had their bye week yet, but we're still talking about, we have a lot to work with in terms of fantasy wide receivers here, and it just has amounted to nothing for Jahan Dotson. I wish I had an answer for it, but all I can say is it's very concerning. It's very concerning at this point that Jahan Dotson, instead of being a guy that probably had, I'm trying to think of like kind of his upside comps, he had decent upside comps. Like he could have been like a Marquise Brown, and maybe that's still in his range of outcomes, but he's looking almost more like Elijah Moore, like poor man's Elijah Moore. I guess second year Elijah Moore would actually be kind of a good comp for him. But it's tough, man. I know a lot of people had high hopes for him. I had high hopes for him myself. I'm not saying it's over. He still has 6 games left to kind of prove that he can do it next to Curtis Samuel or just do it on a consistent basis. But it's tough in terms of like every week starter in fantasy football. That door is starting to close. Now, I also want to touch on one last thing from this game was the Seahawks backfield split where we had Charbonnet out-snap Kenneth Walker for the 3rd game in a row. Now, this is a screenshot from My Fantasy Life. They do amazing stuff. I got to get better at giving people their props when I use their numbers and stuff. But this is from My Fantasy Life. They have a utilization report tool. It's really cool where it breaks down by game everything you want usage-wise in terms of snap percentage, rush attempt share, all of that. And Kenneth Walker's now been out-snapped week 8, week 9, week 10. Now, I'm a big Charbonnet guy. I was saying this kind of stuff in the offseason, but I do want to say I'm not going to take a big fat victory lap here because Kenneth Walker's still out touching him. Like it's very similar to the Derrick Henry Tyjae Spears split, where Tyjae Spears is actually out snapping Derrick Henry when they're in games where they're trailing or close game scripts. But Derrick Henry's still getting the lion's share of the touches and the volume, and that's really what matters in fantasy football. There was 11 opportunities for Charbonnet in this game. He ends up with 10.2 PPR points, which is fine. Like he's definitely trending towards I guess like desperation RB2 and hero RB builds. Like I ran him myself in like a hero RB team, and 10.2, that's just fine. But there was 21 opportunities for Kenneth Walker. He had like 19 carries in this game. He had 19.7 PPR points from this massive 64-yard touchdown reception. Again, it's not over at all for Kenneth Walker. But we did say that early on that, he was valued as a top 5 guy, like true workhorse. The top 5 running back upside is probably not there in this role. Like, we're probably talking about a back-end RB1, but that's still fine. It's someone you can still rock with on your team and be just fine with. But, again, those, like, lofty expectations of him being, like, a true bell cow in this offense, a little bit tougher. Again, Zach Charbonnet continues to see 100% of the third downs, 100% of the 2-minute drill stuff. Kenneth Walker at this point, kind of need big plays from him. He did have 100% of the inside the 5 attempts, which is nice to see as well. But yeah, 76% of the rush attempts is also very good. It's just that in passing situations, he is not there. And outside of, again, he doesn't have that big reception, which I think is fine to kind of take away just because he's not going to catch, like, this is his receiving stat. So he had 2 targets, 1 catch, 64 yards, and a touchdown in this game. Before that, he had 2 targets, 1 catch, 1 yard, 2 targets, 1 catch, 4 yards, 3 targets, 2 catches, 6 yards. Those were his last 3 games receiving. So I think it's a little bit tough to bank on a 64-yard touchdown through the receiving game in every game, but he is like Breece Hall in that he's going to break runs off more often than other running backs. Now, after that, we move to the world famous, what you've all been waiting for, rookie wide receiver report brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Shout out Underdog Fantasy. They support the channel, so we support them. You can see in the background, they gave us the sign, Underdog Fantasy sign back here. They're the best. If you want to check them out, make sure you do. We have a link in the description, in the comment section down below. If you click it, it'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. It'll use promo code RON, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. You can hop on there, do like daily fantasy drafts. It's kind of like DFS, but it's draft form, so you don't have to worry about the salary. Like, the salaries are just too much for me, man. I can't do the salaries, but you can just do like little daily drafts, like 6 people in them. Draft, for like tonight you have an NBA slate you can draft for. You can do NFL, where you can do the entire like week 11 slate coming up here. On top of that, you have the pick'ems, which the pick'ems are very cool. It just sucks that I'm in Jersey. So I can't do the pick'ems. I would be all over the pick'ems. They have some of the best lines out there. You can go higher or lower on like yards, fantasy points, touchdowns, all of that cool stuff. You string them together. I think if you get like 3 right, I think you 6 extra money. If you get 4 right, you 10 extra money. 5 right, you 20 extra money. It's a really cool deal they have there in terms of the pick'ems, where you can have some fun sweats with the higher lowers on there. But they always do these new customer specials. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code RON. They match your first deposit up to $100, and then you will have this pick'em line waiting for you. Higher 0.5 total yards for Josh Allen. Of course, you'll hit that. It's like a free space in the pick'em, so you can get the 4x. If you get 4 right, payout by only actually having to get 3 right. So it's a nice little thing they do for new customers. Make sure you check it out. Underdog Fantasy, promo code RON. Links in the description, in the comment section down below. Now let's get to the rookie wide receiver report, shall we? Now, first up, we have Rashee Rice and Puka Nacua up top. Now, this is rookie wide receivers. I did not think this through in terms of this thing right here. But you have, like here, you can see rookie wide receivers with 140-plus routes sorted by PFF grade, with this column here that's just percent change in PFF grade from last week. So you can kind of see like what the trends are. Like, we'll talk about it in a second, but Jaden Reed pretty much had the best week for his stock. He raised the most in terms of percent change in PFF grade. Now, we talk about the 2 up top, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice. They're both on bye. There's no reason to talk about them. First, we have Demario Douglas. And Demario Douglas is a guy, I'm be honest, wasn't on my radar, and I don't feel bad about missing on him at all. We're talking about, it's Demario Douglas, day 3 guy, undersized, Patriots wide receiver. We've seen the Patriots draft guys like this all the time, and they end up with, being nothing. Like Kayshon Boutte this year, he's been absolutely nothing. Demario Douglas, though, in a game where the Patriots were awful, the Patriots were doing American football a disservice of their representation in Germany this week, where they sucked. They fake spike, bring out Bailey Zappi. Just like the whole ordeal was just awful. But you had Demario Douglas here, 9 targets, 6 catches, 84 yards for 14.4 PPR points. He's going to be more of like your PPR type of wide receiver, but in an offense that's not scoring touchdowns, that's perfect. 14.4 PPR points will do. The per route stuff is elite as well. 24.2% targets per route run. Or actually, my bad. I should explain this a bit better. I know a lot of you guys are returning to the rookie wide receiver report here. We have week 8, week 9, week 10 route percentage. So just how many of the passing plays are you running a route on, right? We want you to be running routes on as many pass plays as possible. Target per route run, so just per route, how many targets are you commanding? Yards per route run, how efficient are you on those targets? PFF grade, how do you look on film to the guys over at PFF? Demario Douglas, like in terms of target per route run, we're looking for 20% plus, yards per route run 2+ in terms of like elite numbers. And then PFF grade 80+ is an elite number. Now, Demario Douglas, elite targets per route run, yards per route run just about elite, high 70s for a day 3 guy in PFF grade, all really good. To me, Demario Douglas is here to stay. Now we have Tank Dell up next. You can see minus 2.4% change in his PFF grade. That's like bad, but I'm not concerned about it at all. He had a target where it turned into an interception, which wasn't great. He also had 14 targets, but just caught 6 of them, so that's also probably another reason why that went down. Like he turned 14 targets into 6 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. You'd like more on 14 targets, but that's still just fine. He had 18.9 PPR points. He had a carry for 13 yards. They like using him like a slight down game, but again, we're talking about 18.9 PPR points. Tank Dell is the real deal. By the way, I actually just moved Tank Dell in that Dynasty rankings up that we talked about earlier. I moved him to wide receiver 24. Like Tank Dell, in terms of day 3 guys, it's as good as it gets in terms of day 3 guys, what he's doing in year 1. Like when we start looking at comps for him in terms of day 3, like we're talking Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, like really impressive stuff here from Tank Dell despite the size. Now after that we have Josh Downs, 18% of the routes, then 43%. He's been limited in these last 2 games with an injury, so I wouldn't really hold that against him. He didn't really do anything crazy in this game. He had 3 catches in this game. Didn't do much, but again, limited playing time. I wouldn't really hold anything against him for that. And he actually increased his PFF grade because he had this gutsy, again, he's hurt, travels to Germany with this team, makes a crazy catch where he's like diving over his shoulder on like a Gardner Minshew scramble. He looks really good, so that's great. Again, not great for fantasy, but you had a bye week. He's going to heal up, and then he should be good to go for this playoff push. After that, we have Zay Flowers. Flowers has been fine. 6 targets, 5 catches, 73 yards in this game versus a really good Browns defense. That's really all you could ask for. Everything looks fine, right? 20% plus target per route run, almost a 2 yards per route run, 70+ PFF grade. Like, that's all solid. That's all solid for rookie wide receiver. There's no reason to panic on any of that. The only thing that you can really nitpick is that this Ravens offense, we would just like more passing touchdowns. It's a lot of Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill punching these in. We're not even getting Lamar rushing touchdowns, which is the most annoying part for anyone out there that has Lamar. It's been frustrating this year. But Zay Flowers, to me, has been just fine. Addison, we're seeing a bit of a dip with Dobbs, which makes sense, right? Kirk Cousins is better quarterback than Josh Dobbs. Dobbs has been great in relief, but it seems like he's really keying in on TJ Hawkinson, which makes sense. A quarterback that's a little bit newer probably would like to lock on to his tight end. Addison did have like 20 points per game in his 4 games before Dobbs comes in. He's hovering about 10 points per game with Dobbs. I think things are going to get better, but you do also have Justin Jefferson coming in here very soon. The Addison stuff, 17.9% targets per route run, 1.69 yards per route run, all just like very solid. He looks fine. I think redraft, his outlook takes a bit of a hit with, of course, Kirk going down and then Justin Jefferson coming back. Whereas I think Jefferson and Hawkinson, I think things are going to be consolidated just enough for them to work with Dobbs here in these coming weeks. I'm not panicking on Addison, but in terms of redraft, he probably gets downgraded from like wide receiver 2 mix to now like a back-end wide receiver 3 flex play type of guy. Then we have Michael Wilson. That's my bad last week. I had him as running 85% of the routes, but I just read it wrong. He was out last week. This week, I think that he had a touchdown called back, which would have made his numbers look a lot better here. But he had 6 targets, 3 catches, 34 yards. Everything's kind of pedestrian when it comes to these numbers on the per route stuff. But if Kyler elevates this offense enough, Michael Wilson's going to turn in some relevant fantasy football performances. Next up, we have Jaden Reed, who's really interesting, man. I did not like him a ton coming out of school. He has really proved me wrong here. Jaden Reed, I think, is a legit guy, and I think people haven't fully caught on yet. He had just 56% of the routes this game, but he ended up with 5 targets, 5 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. Again, on just 56% of the routes, that's very impressive. 19.4 PPR points as a part-time wide receiver. I think that he's a serious threat to get back to this 80% plus and push down your Christian Watsons and your Romeo Dobbs in this offense. Per route numbers look great. PFF grade, PFF has been sleeping on him for a while now, but it's good to see 5% change, the highest of this week. So they're starting to catch on that he can actually play. After that, you have his fellow rookie, Dontavion Wicks. Picked up some of like the Christian Watson slack. He has like an increased route percentage the last 2 weeks, but there's really not a ton to write home about. I mean, these are solid. 17.2% target per route runs, not bad. 1.52 yards per route run. It's just like, I don't know that Dontavion Wicks ever matters for fantasy, you know? Then we have Quentin Johnston. Back-to-back weeks now with 85% plus of the routes. He's a real piece of this offense, which is good. He scored his first touchdown, which is good. But it's tough, man. Like, I don't think you can victory lap the touchdown. The touchdown's good. You know, the touchdown he came up big in that game. But we have a minus 1.8% change in his PFF grade. He left a lot of points on the field, man. He had 2 brutal drops. One of the drops, he had like maybe 50 yards of open field to score a long touchdown. He just claps at the ball. I know I dismissed the hand stuff, and that's just because we've seen in the past, like, players with bad hands where just, you know, they're playing wide receiver in the NFL. It usually goes away, where we've seen Deontay Johnson struggle with drops early in his career. We've seen Amari Cooper struggle with drops early in his career. I thought maybe it'd be something like that here. And maybe Quentin Johnson. I think that he's so raw. There's upside, of course. There's upside that he figures things out, that Keenan Allen takes him under his wing and makes him better. But there's also a chance that this is Jalen Reagor. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you guys. Like, there's a real chance. The floor is the floor. Like, it could go, like, it just, I don't know. Again, like, this is one of his better games of the year, but it just from watching it just feels like he can't, like, he just feels lost and uncoordinated. It's rough, man. Again, he's a raw, high upside prospect. Maybe things go right, but again, like, we're looking Jalen Reagor or Sky Moore if things don't get turned around here by the end of the year with Quentin Johnston. So it's just tough. I mean, 13.3% target per run, not great. 0.8 yards per run, really not good. 60.7 PFF grade, not good. Then we have JSN. It's tough. He's had 2 weeks now, the last 3, where they play him under 70% of the routes here. But he did have 5 targets, 4 catches, 53 yards, which is just fine. He had a minus 1 yard 8 out, which isn't great. We'd like more routes and more downfield targets. It's tough. JSN, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm not a film watcher. A lot of guys told me that JSN was really good. He was like the best wide receiver next to Wilson and Olave. I haven't seen a truly special player when I'm watching these games. I think that the upside is there for him to be a truly special player. I just haven't seen anything all that wild from JSN. At least he's commanding targets, so 19% target per run is nice. I think that there's a ton of upside for JSN. I've just been a bit underwhelmed, is all I'm trying to say. We have Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt's a lost cause, man. I mean, like, it was bad early in the year in terms of, like, PFF grade, yards per run, targets per run, but you can't expect him to do anything with Tommy DeVito. He's kind of in, like, a wasteland right now. I do feel bad for Hyatt. Not good for him. We have Tyler Scott. Not really worth mentioning, but he did make, like, one pretty good play on Thursday Night Football, but that's all I really got for Tyler Scott. John Mingo, someone I think you can really close the door on as a face planner at this point. 7 targets, which is good. Like, he's commanding targets, right? But he turned 7 targets into 3 catches for 20 yards. Like, it just seems like he's not good. We had a lot of concerns about him coming out of school. He's sort of confirmed them at this point. We'll see. I mean, he came into the league as like this, maybe he could be the next Debo, A.J. Brown, big hulking slot receiver. And the yak ability that he was sort of built up to have has just not been there. Then you have Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer keeps on running a ton of routes. He's not commanding targets or being efficient, but he's also running in an offense next to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, so I don't know how much that you can really expect for him to earn in terms of volume on that team, but he keeps making big plays downfield. Like, the announcers, like, keep talking about him. There's constantly dialogue about Trey Palmer just making plays, which is good. Again, I don't really know where he fits in terms of fantasy football, but Trey Palmer is at least a guy running routes, playing football, making plays, which is interesting. Now, that is all we have. Oh, my bad. That is all we have for the rookie wide receiver report. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They have a new customer special just for tonight. Make sure you check that out. Josh Allen, higher 0.5 total yards. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming, we have takeaway number 6, which is the Gibbs versus Montgomery civil war that took place on Twitter. Everybody's going back and forth. You guys know where I stand. I loved Gibbs coming into the year. I wasn't all that heavy on David Montgomery, but I don't think that there has to be this dialogue when we talk about Gibbs or Montgomery where we push down the other. Like, I don't need to come on here and be like, David Montgomery sucks to, like, push up Gibbs. I think they're both good players in their roles. Like, David Montgomery, Dan Campbell, man, or Ben Johnson too, but 4th and 5, they run like a delayed handoff between the tackles, which made sense. Like, there was a very light box. It made sense, but I'm not sure I'd even do that on NCAA 14. You know what I mean? Like a inside zone run out of shotgun on 4th and 5 in like a gotta have it situation was pretty crazy, but it worked. David Montgomery had this long 75-yard touchdown run too. They both looked great, man. Like, the rushing attack was great. To me, this feels a lot like rookie year Kamara, where Kamara was like a top 5 running back and Ingram was like a back end RB1. I think that's what we have. I think Gibbs to me is like an RB1 rest of season, and Montgomery is like a back end RB1, like top 15 running back rest of season as well. There's going to be plenty of touches to go around. After Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta, there's not much going on in the receiving game. You're going to have a lot of stuff go to Jahmyr Gibbs. This is a breakdown of their usage, by the way, from Fantasy Life. I showed you the utilization report. You can also just compare usage between two players like this, which is pretty cool. Jahmyr Gibbs outsnapped him, had more rush attempts, ran more routes. 16% of the targets was great. David Montgomery played more in short yardage. But then Gibbs, the big thing here, 60% of the inside the 5 attempts was huge. They now trust Jahmyr Gibbs as a rusher. They trust him between the tackles. That's all amazing. He's out there 56% of the time on the third down stuff. There was no 2-minute drills here. 26 PPR points as the RB2 for Jahmyr Gibbs. 18 PPR points as the RB10 for David Montgomery. That's perfect, man. I think there's going to be plenty of weeks like this where they're both usable in fantasy. Again, I don't think that you have to diminish the other to prop up the other one. And I also don't think it's a hot take, given Jahmyr Gibbs' explosion in receiving volume, to prefer him in fantasy, but then also not say that David Montgomery is like droppable. You know, they're both good. They're both good. That's all it comes down to. And their usage was interesting too, where it doesn't seem like they're getting used in roles. Hayden pointed out here, Hayden Winks, he does this thing where he charts running backs usage as the game goes on. And it seems like just kind of rotated. He said the Lions basically rotated drives between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Montgomery started, but Gibbs started the second half. Both had 2-minute drill snaps and goal line opportunities. Gibbs' playing time was higher because Montgomery's drive was a 75-yard run. Now, I think that's a little bit of coping from Hayden. I know he's a David Montgomery guy. I don't think that it would skew the snaps that heavy from that one singular drive, but who knows? Regardless, it's very even between the two. It's very even. They use both. They feature the running back. It's all good stuff. And I'll also give Gibbs his flowers. Gibbs looked great, man. The last 3 games he's now had 20-plus PPR points in his last 3 games. Over his last 3 games from Brad Spielberg, we have 5.8 yards per carry with like just about 300 rushing yards there. 3.5 yards after contact, 6th in the NFL. 11 missed tackles forced, 3rd in the NFL. 8 rushes of 10 or more yards, tied for 2nd in the NFL. 9.8% stuff rate, 4th in the NFL. I think that's like 4th lowest is my guess. 17 receptions, 3rd in the NFL. 9 first downs, 7 missed tackles forced on receptions, 3rd in the NFL. Nothing not to love here. You absolutely love to see it. We have 3 straight 20-plus PPR point games for Gibbs. You had 19 opportunities for Gibbs in this game, 12 opportunities for David Montgomery in this game. Again, I think both will be just fine moving forward with a lot of optimism on Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen games, again, where David Montgomery has 30 carries. There's a lot of volume to go around to these running backs. And an even split like this is beautiful for everybody. You don't have David Montgomery getting hurt from 30 carries. You have Jahmyr Gibbs actually being a factor in this offense. Now, after that, we have Keaton Mitchell's a guy. He is very much a guy. He has the highest PFF offensive grade right now. Now, of course, we're talking 15 snaps, okay? So it's a very small sample, but he's doing Devon Achane things right now where 14.3 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 9 missed tackles forced. He has 4 carries of 10-plus yards on 12 attempts. Like, it's crazy. I think that he's going to unseat Justice Hill eventually. He had 3 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown in this game, 2 targets, 1 catch for 32 yards, 13.6 PPR points. He had over 20-plus last week. I think eventually we're going to see him unseat Justice Hill, and then it's wheels all the way up here. This is, again, the utilization report. Jahmyr Gibbs from 64% of the snaps down to 26%. You have Keaton Mitchell going from 17% to 22%, and then it's just going to climb and climb and climb until we have Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell both hovering around 50%, with Gus Edwards as the goal line back and between the short yardage guy and the goal line, and you have Keaton Mitchell and like the Devon Achane role as like your space back, 2-minute drill back, long down and distance back. And that's when things get very interesting for Keaton Mitchell. So to me, not a flash in the pan. Very exciting stuff from him. Our 8th takeaway, Ty Chandler is back in the mix. Now, of course, Alexander Mattison got hurt, but Chandler was in there before that. He ended up with 15 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. I think a lot of people are just going to point to, well, Alexander Mattison got hurt. And yes, that's true. But if we look here on this Hayden Winks chart, you can see right around that 15-minute mark, like Ty Chandler was in there. Like he was in there. I think he got a box name, which means that he had a carry inside the 5-yard line, about 20 minutes in. He was a part of the game plan until Alexander Mattison leaves with almost about 45 minutes into the game, and then it's all Chandler. But again, before that, he was very much involved. So to me, Ty Chandler is like the 1B in this offense, and that's very exciting. If he takes over that lead role from Alexander Mattison, we're talking about someone you can start on a weekly basis. So Ty Chandler is very fun. We'll probably talk about him in the waiver wire video tomorrow. Our 9th takeaway is the Rico Dowdle The Rico Dowdle cuck job is what I wrote down for that. Sounds bad coming out of my mouth, but pause. You have Rico Dowdle scoring a touchdown before Tony Pollard in this game. It's just all bad for Tony Pollard right now. I wish I had something more positive. When Dak was on the field, you had Pollard in 9 of 9 inside the 10. In terms of snaps, 9 of 9 on 3rd and 4th downs. 90% of the snaps. It's everything you could possibly ask for. And we are now at 5 of 6 games. 5 of his last 6 games being under 10 PPR points. Awful stuff. Rico Dowdle scores a touchdown. You also have Sam Sherman here showing 51 running backs with 45 or more rushes. Pollard ranks 44th in PFF grade, 31st in yards at the contact per attempt. Rico Dowdle 14th in PFF rush grade, 8th in yards at the contact per attempt. Dowdle also ranks better in yards per carry and yards per outrun. Dowdle's looked good. Pollard has not. There is a real case for Dowdle to eat into this Pollard role. So it's all just bad with Pollard. I wish I had something positive to say, but I don't. The explosion doesn't look like it's there anymore for Pollard. They're using him between the guards out of shotgun, which isn't good for Tony Pollard. It's just all bad. Again, I wish I had something more positive, but it's pretty rough for Pollard right now. That was supposed to be the matchup versus the Giants here, and he came up empty. Now, our 10th and final takeaway here is Dameon Pierce is dead, I'm afraid. Dameon Pierce, someone that we liked going into the year. Devon Singletary had a game a couple weeks ago where he just like completely unseated him, was like the main back. Things went back to 50-50 after the bye week. Dameon Pierce gets hurt. And last week, Devon Singletary sucked. This week versus the Bengals, as much people, like C.J. Stroud played great. Don't get me wrong. C.J. Stroud played great, but he also had an interception and 2 fumbles lost here. Devon Singletary carried the ball 30 times for 150 yards and a touchdown with 5 yards per carry. The stat from Ryan Heath here is that 30 carries for him was the 3rd most carries by any running back in a game this season, in the most of Singletary's career. He averaged 5 yards per carry, which until this week, no Texans running back had exceeded 3.4 yards per carry on 15-plus carries. So they had been struggling in the run game, and it finally came through for them this week. To me, it was a big reason why they won this game. And when you win a big game, you probably use a lot of the things that won you that game moving forward. So I think Devon Singletary, to me, is probably, the RB1 until further notice. I think he's going to have the first crack to be the lead back. Now, if he gets cold and he has a 3-yard per carry game and Dameon Pierce comes in and he has a 5 yards per carry game, maybe things switch. But Dameon Pierce is going to come back from injury, and he is going to be the 1B in this backfield, which means that Devon Singletary is going to be high-end RB3 moving forward. In games without Dameon Pierce, he'll be like an RB2 moving forward. So just something to note in terms of how the Texans' backfield is split up here. But that's going to do it for us today. Again, shout out Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the channel, sponsoring the video. Make sure you check out the Josh Allen special on Underdog. Higher 0.5 total yards on there. If you use promo code RON, they'll match your first deposit up to $100. You'll have the link in the description, the comment section down below. Click it. It'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. It'll use my promo code right away for you. And you can hop on there, try out their pick'ems, their drafts, all of that good stuff. Now, if you're already on Underdog Fantasy, I appreciate you for watching these videos. We're in, week 11 now? We're in there. And those of you guys that are watching are like true supporters of the channel at this point. But I appreciate all of you guys. As always, I love y'all. And I will see you in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm